Hi, this is Ann with Fiber Designs by Ann, and I'm doing textile coloring again. This is the second part in the series of textile color fabric that I'm creating. And today we're going to be using a sponge. This is just a regular thin sponge. We want it to have nice texture on it. Don't use a sponge that's smooth. It's better to have one that has texture. I'm using Textile Color, Jacquard Textile Color, and today I'm using Sky Blue. I have a craft stick that I'm going to use like a spreader, so you could use maybe we could try anything that works, a regular palette knife, a regular knife, your finger, and I have a little bit of water in a container. I have a mist bottle, but I'm not sure I'm going to use that. This piece was entirely made using the technique with the sponges. The background, I cut a circle for this, and then the leaves was made on a solid piece of fabric that I cut into the leaf shapes. I'm going to machine quilt this, and I think I'll turn it into a pillow. I'm not totally sure, but when I do that video, I will post it. I have a piece of Pima cotton, 100% fabric, 100% cotton fabric, and it's white, and this is a small piece. You could do it on a large piece, but this is what I'm using for my sample today. I will take the sponge, and usually you can cut it with scissors. Don't damage really good scissors, but while it's dry and tough, actually you could try and cut it when it's wet. It might be easier, but not so good on the scissors. Anyway, I cut it up while it was dry, and I made a few different shapes. These I haven't used, but it's the same technique for any of them. These you can tell I've used. And I'm going to take my little bit of water. Well, first, make sure your paint's nice and mixed up. I don't usually dip into the paint, but because I'm not mixing any other colors, I'm going to go ahead and do that with this. And first you're going to take your sponge and you're going to drop it in your water. Now, it may be different if the sponge has already been painted on. A regular sponge, well, this hasn't been painted, I'll drop it in. It's going to drink up all the water pretty quickly, get nice and soft and grow. And you're going to squeeze the water, but you're not going to squeeze it really tight. You want it pretty wet. You don't want it dripping. So if it's still dripping, squeeze maybe just a little bit more. I'm going to do it with a square because that's what I want to use instead of that rectangle. And you can see if it's painted, that side doesn't drink up the paint so much, so I'm going to use the soft side. But like I always say, experiment. This has got a nice surface on it. It might even work better. But since I'm starting here, I'll be using the soft side. Don't use, this textile paint is good. I was going to use another textile paint and it's too thin. You want it to have a little bit of a stability, not be too watery. And you're going to just light touch, spread it over the surface. If you don't do it evenly, that's fine. You'll just get a different technique. I don't really want it to go into the crevices, but again, it's fine because the difference is going to be how hard you push down on it when you put it on the fabric. And I'm going to just start in the center on this one. And I'm hardly pushing. And when there's a design like that, I can turn my piece. I may not be able to. And actually use that to make a pattern. So I'm going to have these little circles in the center. Whoops. And you can see a design. Now I can press it harder and let more water out, and you can see what happens. It's more mushy, more watercolor. My fabric is dry. I think I neglected to say that. Makes a difference. If I had started with wet fabric, this is probably what would have been happening. But since I started with dry, this is going to stay pretty put. Now I'll do one more of these, or maybe I'll go all the way around so that it's more consistent. I could put paint on it again, but realize that it will change the design. You could paint half of the surface or cut the foam and the sponge in half. There's a lot of different ways you could use this. If I just did a soft, very soft print, you can see where I'm pushing harder and also where there may be paint collected. Like this corner has a lot of paint. It's a really fun technique. I love that you can get this background. You can put your sponge back in the water and let that water flow through to the other side and really make it wet. And you can see the water, the paint blooming out in the water. But now if I come back to this, there's some blobs of paint here, so those will move, but this is probably pretty stable. But I can put another layer and make it not blue and white, which I kind of like it that here. But if I put the water on it, then my background becomes blue as well, and then it is like a tone on tone again. You could use it to do an actual, like a border on a piece of fabric. If this was a dry sponge, it would be better for a border, of course. Gives you something to stitch, hand stitch, or quilt around, perhaps. Let me do a little with a circle. You could change the colors. Now this, I think the paint dried on this before I rinsed it out, so I'm not sure what we're going to get. But that's fun. That's experimenting. This is almost more of an oval than a circle. You see the little design there. You could do something and pretend those are eyes. Looks kind of like planets. There's just a lot of ideas that come to mind when using a fabric that's been done with this technique. It's just a really good background fabric, or like I said with the leaves, you can make a solid piece and then cut it into different shapes and use those for applique. I just love what looks like a lot of texture going on. Now I have this on plastic. If I move it, there's still wet paint on the plastic and it will change it. It will, don't want to say mess it up, but it will change the design by transferring that wet paint to different places on here. So you may want to leave it to dry, or a lot of times I work on a smaller piece of plastic or something, cardboard, something that I can move. I hope you liked learning about this technique and that you'll give it a try. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, do, and tap the bell so that you get notifications for my newest videos. This has been Ann. Thanks a lot for watching.